Hey, folks, we're going to go to LinkedIn for an anonymous question. So, just a reminder if you want stuff answered, you can either leave it in the comments below or send it over on social media. If you look for Dev Leader, that's my main YouTube channel and my alias and personal social media handle that I use. And then you can look for Nick Cosentino on LinkedIn otherwise and send over stuff. The more detail, the better. And so, this person sent over a bunch of information. We're going to talk about big tech, interviewing, that kind of stuff. So I said currently I have some experience. I'm at the stage where we're getting interviews for big tech, for example, and then they list out a couple of dates and times where they had some interviews and stuff, but they're not really breaking in is the challenge here. So I really want to break into big tech, and I feel like I'm at the doorstep. They seem like they've been having some success with getting offers from what I would still they listed out a couple of companies. I would still say very reputable. Like I think that's awesome. So they're not stuck in the sense where they're not getting any opportunities, but they're kind of looking for something else, and it seems to be like big tech is the thing that they're trying to get some access to. So um, they talk about the interview process a little bit. So they mentioned one of the companies was Lead Code, which they were able to solve, but not optimally. I made other videos before on my sort of feelings about Lead Code and stuff. It's like one of those things where I feel like get ready to do it in an interview, but I think it's personally, I don't think it translates well into actual software engineering practices, nor do I feel like it's a useful tool for interviewers to use, from my experience. They say, but the other two baffle my mind. They didn't ask me Lead Code. It was more of a higher level problem solving conversation, which is interesting. I can't tell from this statement exactly if that was more system design, because I would say other times when you get like coding questions or like system design, and I should say and or, because you usually get both. And the system design might be like more of a distributed system type of thing. And those are generally like open ended problem solving, I find. But that doesn't necessarily mean that this was system design. When I ask the coding questions in interviews that I do, I don't make them lead code. They are very much data structures and algorithms, and they're simple. And I didn't pick the word easy. I said simple on purpose because I don't like to say that things are easy, because some people might find things easier than others, but there's not a lot of complexity. Like objectively, it's not a lot of complexity. But I do then take that and scale it up and I modify it. So if people are flying through it, I go, great, okay, like let's add. And it's not tricks. I make it very clear. If people have interviewed with me, I will literally tell them I do not give you trick questions, and I will change constraints, but that's not to say like, haha, screw you. It's really to say, great, like, thank you so far for your answer. What happens if we change the constraints? So I approach things that way, which may be kind of like what this person's experiencing. They said one of their interviews went overtime and they felt like they solved it conceptually. It seemed like things went well, got good feedback. Some points where they got stuck, but interviewer asked them questions and they kept going. So overall felt like it was pretty good. Um, in the end, I got ghosted. So I think number one, just on getting ghosted and stuff, I don't think that it's a good practice that any company ever would ghost someone that they interviewed. Um, I can't I can't speak for any people that are doing that, but even like at a minimum, it's like, do you not even have automation that, like, if you're a bigger company, you have a pipeline of people coming through with automation, right, to be able to take in the resumes and stuff. You put them into a scheduling system where people are getting their interviews. Like, how do you not, like, at a minimum have automation to say thank you? But like, yeah, the getting ghosted stuff is like, I think that's there. I just don't think there's an excuse for it. Um, I would even say, like, I would go as far as saying, even if you interviewed a candidate as a company, you interviewed a candidate and you're like, man, that person really sucked, we would never hire them. I would still make sure to be able to send something. It feels like not right to me. I can't think of a good excuse to defend organizations that don't do that. That's why I was saying, like, you can't even say, oops, I forgot. It's like, how do you, at a minimum, not have automation for that? But anyway, They didn't end up getting roles that way, and these are for big tech companies. And they said maybe some other similar occurrences with another one. So maybe I should be happy where I'm at, and the grass isn't greener on the other side. But I have a dream to get into one of those top companies, and I feel like I'm knocking at the door. Any tips? So yeah, let's talk about this. I think it's a challenging one. And when I say challenging, I mean like to kind of be going through an experience like that. Also, want to mention like said this in a couple videos that I've done earlier this week. I am like completely burnt out, and it's the tail end of the week. I was hoping that getting a little bit more sleep and stuff would like help reset. I'm hopeful that having a weekend will help with that. Um, if it doesn't, then I'm not really sure. But I know I know all this kind of stuff from going through burnout before is not like it's not permanent. I know everything has sort of a timeline to it, so I'm just trying to be transparent. Like these are vlog entries, so if I'm going through periods where I'm kind of feeling like shit, I don't want you to. I want you to understand when I'm trying to answer stuff. That any sort of state of mind I'm in automatically has a bit of a bias and stuff. I'm just trying to be clear about that. But I think this is a good one. So um, where to start though? Okay, let's talk about grass being greener on the other side. I've also made videos on this. I don't think. Sorry, let me say that start it a different way. I think that the phrase "the grass is not always greener on the other side" is very true. Um, and I think in particular when we have in our mind what it's like to be at a different place. Okay, so if you're basing everything on something that's more like you've kind of created it, if that makes sense. Like you have some vision of what it's going to be like to work at one of these companies, some big tech company, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook. You have an idea in your mind, but like you have not done it yet. So are you basing that on what you think it's like, or because you have people like friends and or family and people that are close to you that are telling you about this firsthand that you trust and understand that experience? Are you just going by what social media is like? Like I work at Microsoft, right? And I'm telling you right now, like sorry, when I say telling you right now, I mean in this video I've been telling you like I'm currently burnt out. So, do you watch one video of me and you're like, "Oh, this guy works at Microsoft and he's burnt out. It must be shitty there." No, like I like the team I'm working on. I like the space I'm working in. I like working for my manager. I've had very good work-life balance. Like I'm going through a phase right now where I'm totally burnt out. So, like is your perception of this kind of stuff skewed based on what you see versus what reality is? So I do very much think the grass is greener or is not always greener on the other side is important to think about. Now, with that said, I don't think there's anything wrong with aspiring to do something, right? So it's not for me to say, oh, like you shouldn't even try big tech, like not for you. No, like if you have an interest in doing it, if that's something that you want to go achieve, then I think you should try and do that. I just want to like clarify for people that it's like I think you need to understand why you're trying to do it, right? Because if it's, well, once I do that, I'm set. Well, no, that's not true. There's been lots of layoffs across different companies. It's not it's not perfect, right? You might find yourself in a position where the you feel like you're not engaged at work. You might find yourself in a position where you're not getting the promotion trajectory. You could have a period of burnout. Maybe the team you're working on kind of puts you into a perpetual state of burnout. Like you don't you don't really know these things until you're doing it. So I just like I think it's okay to set goals. I think it's okay to work towards those, but I would try and understand like what it is you're actually trying to do. And I realize that's kind of a weird statement. It's like, well, what do you mean, Nick? What am I trying to do? But so like is it, and there's nothing wrong with this by the way, but like is it just to be able to have the title on your resume? Is it because you will feel accomplished when you have sort of been granted access into big tech? And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with wanting that. That's not for me to decide. I'm just trying to say, I think you need to think about and be honest with yourself about what that is. Because I think if you're not doing that, and say this person is able to get into big tech, are they going to be disappointed? Right? Like, what is the reason why they're trying to do that? I have a sneeze coming on, by the way. It could show up at any moment, so be prepared. So I think that that's an important thing to think about, because say that this is a focus of theirs, or they're like, I have this goal, I want to be able to do it. If they're not understanding the clarity around that goal, and then they keep putting in all this effort, are they truly going to find themselves unhappy once they reach it? So I to be maybe like a little bit more philosophical, like I was saying, I don't think there's anything wrong with having these specific goals just to be able to say, get it on your resume, whatever, or to say like, okay, now I'm in this pay tier, like I feel better. Totally fine. Like, not for me to decide. I think when it comes to happiness, again, maybe a little bit more philosophical, I think that one, you're going to want to make sure that you are feeling valued in terms of compensation. I think that's important. That number will be different for different people. So it's not for me to say you got to be making at least 100K, 200K, 300K. Not for me to decide, but I think you need to feel valued through compensation. And part of that is also making sure that there's a standard of living that you're meeting, and you're feeling safe, you're able to provide for your family, whatever that looks like, right? I think that needs to be covered. And then you need to feel valued in terms of compensation. So the amount of work you're doing, like, do you feel that you are being treated fairly that way? So I think that's a part of it on the compensation side. And notice I'm being very generic here. I'm not saying like here's the number or whatever, because like I said, it's going to be different for everyone. I think that for most people, some level of autonomy, some level of being challenged, some level of interesting work, growth, right? So I think there's sort of, it's like a little bit nebulous to talk about, but I think that in terms of finding fulfillment, or I want to talk about fulfillment after. So maybe let me talk about engagement, right? In terms of being engaged at work, some balance of being challenged, having autonomy, this kind of stuff. That's going to look different for everyone in terms of what motivates them and gets them engaged, right? Some people love new tech. They just want to work on new tech. They're happy. Some people really like difficult challenges where they're like, okay, like no one solved this yet. Like I'm going to be the one to do it. And like, they're like super motivated. They can get stuck against a wall for a week, and then they're like finally have a breakthrough and they love it. There's all sorts of different motivation, and I think that's important for you to figure out how you find that. Could you find that at a big tech company versus a smaller one versus some other company? Probably. I don't think it's tied to big tech. Now, on fulfillment, which is what I think is important, is maybe the domain or the type of work you're doing might have a really big impact that way. So I've talked about. I don't know who's watching this that's new to the channel versus like a new person. But I used to work at a digital forensics company. When I talk about fulfillment um, from the perspective of the domain I was in, I will say it like I feel like I can almost say this with like a very high degree of confidence. I don't know if I will ever in my life find work that was that fulfilling, which is a pretty bold statement, but like we were able to help create software to help catch pedophiles, convict them. It was used for more things than that, but like that was a big part of it, to be able to help save kids. I don't I just don't know of something that feels more fulfilling than that. Now in my role, I find fulfillment as an engineering manager where I'm able to help others around me. That's why I make content like this and try to answer questions, because it's not the YouTube ad revenue, the dollar a day that gets made kind of thing that I'm ultimately going to spend on video editing for my other channel. It's not that. It's because it feels good to me. It's fulfilling. So I want to be able to help because it feels good to me to be able to help others. So I think that when we're exploring these job opportunities or thinking about where we want to be, for me, I think those are the types of things you want to be asking yourself. Like, what does fulfillment look like? What does fair compensation look like? What does engagement look like? Because I think those things to me, I'm not limiting it to that, by the way, like work-life balance, there's other factors, but my point is I'm trying to give you some ideas. Like, think about those things. And then I would be asking the question, does this company provide that opportunity? And if it does, great. Because one of the things they were saying Is like, yeah, they do have some of these other opportunities that might not be big tech. Should I be happy with that? The answer, I think, is maybe. Again, I'm not here to say like don't strive for other things, but what is it that you're trying to get out of them? Maybe I'm just making this up, but maybe for this person, it's like the compensation. Let's pretend everything else about the job, the work, whatever is the exact same, but the compensation's 50% more. And they're like, for me, that's actually something that I want. Okay, like you understand the reason. I'm not saying reason is right or wrong. I just want you to understand it. So, okay, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about from that perspective. I'm just kind of scrolling through again. In terms of interviews and stuff, yeah, I think, um, let me just double check. I want to make sure I can answer their question specifically. So, um, any tips? Yeah, about kind of this. I think it's just about this approach. So, in terms of breaking into big tech, though, um, typically, I know they were saying they had some interviews that weren't like lead code. I will say, brush up on the lead code. I think that's going to be like a number one type of thing. In my opinion, the other thing, like the system design kind of questions, those are the really open ended ones. I find should be asking a lot of questions that try and clarify like what the requirements are, so you can be optimizing for the right things. So you're directing the focus to the right areas. So um, I think personally, if you practice those types of questions, are very open ended for system design, and you can cover your elite code. If you're like this person and getting some questions that seem like they're maybe somewhere in the middle, like maybe it's not system design, but it's still kind of open ended problem solving. I feel like practicing those system design ones help with that a lot conceptually. So that would be my recommendation on like the technical interviewing part. If you don't know where to go online to look for example questions and this kind of stuff, literally, I think you can probably have success with asking LLMs like ChatGPT or whatever you want to use, right? So, hey, like I'm this level of software developer. Here are the tech companies I'm thinking of interviewing for. Could you give me 5 examples of open-ended problem-solving questions for software developers at this level at these companies? The the reason that I kind of like that approach is that I don't like the idea of like trying to like hack the system. Like, how do I find the question bank that they're going to ask me? Because like, uh, I don't know. Like, sure, if you can find that, great. I would just really hope that you're not in the interview and you were banking on that, and then you get asked something different, and you were like, great. I blew the opportunity to try and understand how to approach solving these problems just by thinking that I could memorize it. So I just don't like kind of doing that thing. It's not something that I would ever recommend. Can you have success doing it? Sure. I know people that used to do tons of leet code and kind of just like memorize or like practice like specific interviewing techniques for the technical portions, and they would do well. And then they would tell me like I don't really know how to write software, and it's not me judging them. That's them telling me, by the way. So um, yeah, I would practice leet code to be prepared for that, and then I would make sure doing like practicing your system design questions. The You could also leverage LLMs in the sense where you're like, um, you could probably treat it like an interview. Like you could start a new conversation and say, here's a question that's like very vague, and then say like, I'm going to be the interviewee, you're the interviewer, and like I'm going to be asking you questions to make the scenario more specific, and you're going to tell me about the constraints as I ask them. Like you can set this up for yourself. The point is being able to practice navigating this kind of stuff. I think is important because it is open ended. So this person doesn't talk about behavioral interview questions, which I think are a big part, but I'm assuming they're not mentioning it because that didn't seem to be a sticking point. So that's good. But behavioral interview questions are a big part of this kind of stuff. I always try to remind people my biggest takeaway for behavioral interview questions, especially for software developers, is we need to remember that it's a behavioral interview question. They are not questioning you about your tech choices. They don't need all the detail about the product and the service. They don't need to know how awesome it was. They don't need all the nuances. I know it's like cool and exciting for you, and like that's great. And I'm not saying that facetiously. I mean, like it's great that you actually get pumped about it. But when it's a behavioral interview question, you only got so much time in the interview. Focus on what the goal of the question is. If you don't know how to navigate this kind of stuff, again, you can use AI to give you example behavioral interview questions. You want to make sure you're understanding from the interviewer's perspective what is it that they're trying to take away from a behavioral aspect of what I'm doing in some scenario. If they say, tell me about a project where, and then, you had interpersonal conflict, you failed to meet the delivery, you had, differences of opinions, you had to motivate or lead the team, you had teams that were behind on deadlines. Like the tell me about a project part, they're not saying, give me all the technical details of that. They're just giving you some framing for a scenario, and then they want you to talk about one of these things you had to navigate. So practice those if you're not comfortable with those. But I think one final point for this person, I'm hoping that this is helpful. By the way, I realize it's not like, I don't think I'm saying anything groundbreaking. And so I said this in a couple of videos earlier this week. I think sometimes when people message and they ask questions, um, so I can't say this with like a high degree of confidence because it's kind of like it's a little woo woo, but sometimes I read this stuff and I'm like, I think these people are doing great, and I think they're trying hard, they're doing great, and they're just not having good luck. And I feel like if they wouldn't have messaged me, if they wouldn't have seen any content I put out, and they just kept doing what they were doing, that they would be successful. So I'm kind of making this to talk about some perspective and share my thoughts, but I'm not going to be the person that makes the difference here. I think that this person already is doing, the thing that makes a difference. And kind of wanted to, wrap it up with my closing point here, that especially for like this individual, this could be you too, right? You may have situations where you've actually interviewed very well. Okay, so you might have aced the programming question. They give you a system design or open-ended problem-solving question. You do a great job there. By the way, you don't have to get everything perfect. Like this person was saying, it feels like they got asked some questions, they answered them, they kept moving. Like that's great. But you could be doing all of this stuff, what seems like perfect. Do a great job on your behavioral interview questions. The thing is that we don't have control over everything. There's always going to be factors that we don't have control over. And the problem is that if it doesn't end up our way, it feels like it was all our fault. So in this person's case, they might have had an amazing set of interviews, but there's one position, and there happened to be someone who also had amazing interviews. What doesn't happen is that they go, great, we'll just hire the two people because they scored so well on the interviews, we'll just hire them both. If there's no budget for it, there's no headcount on the teams, it won't happen. And then you might say, well, that's unfair. Why wouldn't they want to hire the good talent? They demonstrated it. I understand. It's not, unfortunately, it's not about like what is fair or what seems like common sense to you. And it kind of sounds shitty to say. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just saying that's just like, that isn't reality. The reality is if they only have one headcount, then they can't. There could be situations where a team, I don't have a specific real example of this, but I could hypothesize situations where teams are, okay, we have headcount, we set up all the interview rounds, we're doing them. And then for some reason, based on their scheduling, they cross over their sort of like fiscal quarter, budget expires, and they go, oh shit, I guess we actually can't hire, like for whatever reason, can't hire now. So that's it. Right? They don't even fill the one head count they had. Right? So you might have done an awesome job. And then you might say, well, why aren't they calling me back? Then why aren't they trying to refer me to another open position? I don't know. I don't have a good explanation for that. Yes, that does seem logical. I absolutely agree that they should do that if you did so good. I'm on your side. But I don't have I don't have a reason for it. So my point is that there's a lot of stuff that's not in your control, and it's very, very easy to blame yourself for it. And I think out of anything I've said in this video, that's the one thing that I want you to take away from it, is that you could show up on one day, do your absolute best, and it could be, truthfully, it could be amazing to the people that are interviewing you. And someone else on that day just might happen to be a little bit more amazing. 0.1% better. And that should not make you feel like you're worthless. So I hope that little bit helps. I wanted to thank this person for sending this in, and I hope that helps. And if you got questions, send them in, and I'll see you next time. Take care.